allowing people to be disappointed, I think, is one of the hardest relational things that most of us struggle with. Like, oh, great, I'm going to have to like let down somebody and they're going to be upset at me for my choices.
Hello and welcome to the Be Well Baby podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Spade. Today's episode dives into one of the biggest transitions nobody fully prepares you for: how relationships change after having a baby. And not just with your partner, but with your parents, your in-laws, your friends, and even yourself. I'm joined by Julia Chapman, a marriage and family therapist specializing in perinatal mental health. And together, we uncover what really happens behind the scenes in early postpartum. By the end of this episode, you are going to learn how to navigate shifts in friendships and family relationships without guilt or resentment, why communication and boundaries are your secret tools for surviving sleep deprivation, identity shifts, and intrusive thoughts. I really firmly believe that boundaries are like the sexiest thing in the world. And you'll learn how to hold space for yourself and your partner while honoring your new baby, your culture, and your family traditions. This is an honest, grounded, compassionate conversation inside Beyond Birth about what's normal, what's typical, what's hard, what's really, really tender, and how to move through it all with more support and less shame. If you're pregnant, newly postpartum, or even a few years in and still feeling the ripple effects, this episode is for you. Shall we dive in to navigating relationship changes? I'm so excited. We talk about this a lot just in general, but not with Julia's expertise. So welcome, Julia Chapman. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I would love for you to start by telling us just a little bit about kind of what brought you to supporting families in this really intimate season of life and kind of what you do in general.
So I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I've been working in private practice for about 12 years. And I started before I became a parent. And then obviously I've had two kids. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old since then. I think my being drawn to this particular type of work, working with new parents and working with people going through pregnancy and postpartum and early parenthood, really shifted in a couple of ways. One, I started having my own kids and realized just how little that I knew about parent. Like, I thought I was very empathetic and aware, but when I became a parent, I was like, oh, I get this in a whole different way. And it really strengthened my practice in general. But also, I just ended up having a lot of women going through that experience all at the same time. And I felt really drawn to getting more training. And so I got a perinatal mental health certification through Postpartum Support International, which is a great organization. They have tons of resources. And so I've kind of delved into that realm in addition to some of my other training and specialties that I work with. So I work with individuals and couples, and I love helping with all of the relationship changes that go on during that time.
Yeah. What are some of the most common relationship shifts that you see with that intimate partner relationship?
Yeah, I think so. When I do, I love doing couples therapy with people in the postpartum and while they're going through pregnancy, because expectations and reality can be quite different. And I think it can be sometimes, if you're really, really close to your partner, one of the first times that there's just these really drastically different experiences, especially for the birthing partner and the non-birthing partner. Obviously, if you're going through adoption and things like that, there's also really different experiences. But that contrast between something happening in one's body versus not, and I think that can feel really alienating if you're really close to your partner, especially if you share so much and you're on the same page.
You mean alienating for the partner?
I think for both people. I think the non-birthing partner can feel really left out of the experience and really not understand. I see that happening a lot. Like, that their partner has disappeared, that they're, paying attention to the baby, that they're, like all the stuff going on with their body. And then for the birthing partner, it can feel like, wow, I have all of these responsibilities and this emotional and mental connection with the baby that is really organic, that really isn't something that you have to put on. It's just there. And that just is a very different set of responsibilities and emotional experiences, I think.
What do you feel like tends to surprise couples the most about that shift and that sort of alienation on both sides?
Sometimes people just have very different ideas about what to do instinctively, like how they want to parent. There's sometimes people can be like, oh, I didn't realize you were so easygoing, or I didn't realize you were going to be so anxious, or that, we've been on the same page about so many things and suddenly we're not on the same page anymore. And that can feel really scary when you have such a big responsibility and everybody is so sleep deprived, because that just adds a whole nother level of crankiness into the mix.
Totally. I'm imagining every person I've ever worked with who's had those cranky conversations with their intimate partner.
Yeah.
What would you say to them about how to start a conversation about some of these things, maybe before baby arrives, if they're in that space, like some of our listeners, or if their baby has already come and resentment is starting to build, but they're sort of like, I don't want this, like how do they start that conversation?
I think that's a great question, because sometimes it doesn't feel like there's a great opening for that conversation just in the midst of all that you're doing, especially when there's a baby there. You're like, I have to feed them and change their diaper, and I haven't slept and I haven't taken a shower. And I think probably if you're finding yourself really cranky, the first step is being like, what can I do to take care of myself? If that means, the communication's second, but like if I need to go take a shower and go take a nap and let my partner take over and then reapproach the conversation when I'm fresher, doing some journaling about it can be really helpful. I know journaling feels impossible, but even if it's like just typing on your phone for a few minutes and being like, what am I really wanting here? So coming in with some more direct requests can be helpful, instead of like, you didn't do this and this needs to happen and blah. Like really coming in with a more directed idea of what it is that you're really wanting and needing from them.
Hearing you just say that made me think that we're talking about like your partner's not taking the trash out or cleaning the kitchen or those little things. But I feel like sometimes it's bigger than that.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
About that.
Yeah. Well, there's that piece, but I think there's also the piece of just feeling lonely and needing a source of connection. And sometimes it's that like, I always encourage partners to have like, even if you can just have 15 minutes to just debrief with each other and just be with each other, that sometimes is what people feel like they're really missing, that everybody's off doing their own things or just taking the time for themselves when they can and not really getting to actually have that deeper emotional connection. And I think it can be something where it's great to have a source of support who's not just your partner also, I will say, just so that you can kind of clarify how you're feeling before you bring it to them. But really just being, I think, open about how you're doing. And if they're not getting it, that can be a great time to seek out some therapy. That can be a great time to talk to friends who might have a better understanding. And that can also be like drawing on past conflicts that you've had with them and what has worked for your relationship. Like if you've had conflict in the past, like what has helped you feel heard? What do you know about yourself in terms of what kind of emotional support you really need?
What are the most common, I guess, for lack of a better word, complaints that you hear from couples?
A lot of them. I think it can range from, you don't understand my experience, I'm doing more than, there's like a inequality feeling of like, I'm doing more. I think that can come up to around like different like leave of absences from work, where one person is usually the partner who has not given birth is going back to work, and the other partner is there alone with the baby. And so the partner who's gone to work comes back and is like, well, you have all day to like just be at home. Like, why can't, like, this is so great. You're so lucky. And they're feeling like, I just want to pass the baby off to you because I'm exhausted. I wish I could go back to work in some ways. Like, I wish I had that autonomy. And so there can be a lot of disconnect there of just having those different experiences and not getting it.
Or even like, I wish I could do the laundry, but I can't.
Yeah. I wish I could go to the gym and take a shower on your way home from work, but like I'm here breastfeeding all day. So yeah, there's a lot of that kind of like different wavelength stuff. And then it can come into, like chores around the house. It can come up distribution of labor. It can come up with just different ideas about how to take care of the baby, different ideas about how to include family. That's a big one. Not really being on the same page about how to involve other people in those early months of life.
Yeah, let's kind of shift into that. I know that some of the people on our call have an amazing partner who, like, for example, takes the baby on Saturdays so that she can
That's
have a
great.
full day to do whatever she needs to do, you know. And I think like hearing examples like that is really amazing and helpful to kind of understand the balance of the load. And I think a lot of partners don't actually understand what it means to be home with a baby all day.
A really, really great point that I think one of the tensions that I see a lot is that if one partner is not home with the baby a lot, it can be difficult for the other partner to let go of the control to actually give them the experience to practice. And so I think really getting in the habit of letting your partner practice so that you feel confident. If the birthing partner is at all anxious, which most of us at one point or another are, whether that's truly postpartum anxiety or whether that's actually just regular, I'm going through this huge transition, I'm taking care of this small human type of anxiety, like really feeling like your partner's got it is such a relief. And I will say sometimes that's not possible too. Like people are like, you know, I'll use myself as an example, like neither of my children took a bottle. And no formula, like wouldn't drink out of a bottle at all. So it was like feeding was 100% me. And so it was very difficult to figure out that balance of having a time away. It's still really important.
Yeah. I mean, this is really bringing up something I remember vividly from my first baby being born, that someone gave me the advice that my husband should change the baby's diaper for the first 2 weeks. I shouldn't do it. And for me, someone who had changed literally 10 diapers a day working in the NICU every single day for years, I was like, I can't do that. I'm better at it than he is. And also, like, what if he lifts them by the feet? I have this whole way that I teach people how to appropriately change a baby's diaper without creating like space in their little joints, you know, all of the things that I do and think. And so all I did was, before the baby was born, I was like, this is how I would like you to change the diaper. And I showed him that you hold the feet back rather than lifting them up to the ceiling, and make sure that it's nice and clean. Please wipe the girl front to back, you know, like
all the things.
All the things. Expect that for a baby girl, there might be a little bit of blood. Don't be alarmed. You know, like everything that I was already totally okay with and that I knew he would have no idea. And then I just let it go. And I was like, I showed him, I trust that he took in what he needed to take in and everything will be fine. And I didn't touch a diaper for the first 2 weeks of any of our babies' lives. And I now use that as one of the primary bonding tactics for partners, because those small, like, people will like try to rush through a diaper change because a baby's crying. But if you can slow it down, that can help your baby regulate, and it can be an incredible time to make eye contact. It can be an incredible time to bond with your baby. And a lot of babies will be like, I love this. Being with my other parent, and it's just the best thing in the world, and they'll laugh, and you know, so.
And there's so many diaper changes in those first couple weeks.
Exactly. So for parents who are like, I really wanted to bottle feed this baby, but then the birthing person is like, I want to breastfeed exclusively, that's it. I'm like, you have to change every diaper, and you have to do like the cleaning and the
care.
And it's so important, because while you're doing that, your partner who birthed the baby has to heal. And then as your baby grows, there will be a trust there, and it will be so beautiful.
I love that idea.
You probably already have one of these, but if you don't, I wanted to tell you all about the Aura Ring. I started using it postpartum with my second baby so that I could actually see how poor my sleep quality was. And watching the subtle shifts over time has been incredible. It tracks your heart rate variability, your sleep, your recovery, even the little changes in your body temperature before you notice them. It was really amazing to see my stats change throughout my third pregnancy and then watch them improve postpartum. One of my favorite things, it actually gives me permission to rest. And as someone who struggles to rest, that is everything. It really points me to recovery in a way that nothing else does. You can click the link in the show notes for 10% off your Oura Ring, or if you already have one, grab one for your bestie or your mom for the holidays. They deserve rest too. Let's move. We kind of touched on like the parents and the in-laws of the birthing dyad. So what kind of things do you see change most often with the birthing couple and then their parents' generation and that dynamic?
Yeah, so I think some people have the great experience of being really close to their parents and other people do not. And so I think that piece of it is a really important criteria going in. I worked with a couple recently throughout their whole pregnancy, which I thought was one of the most, like, I saw just the huge reward that entailed. And they really came up with a plan as a part of our therapy of how they wanted to engage with their parents postpartum. And really, it gave them the opportunity, not when they were sleep deprived, not when they were like maybe a little bit because of pregnancy, but just to be able to be like, okay, we want to invite this person in this way. We want to invite this person, because I think people tend to descend when a baby is born and feel also different cultural norms and expectations, also some entitlement about their connection with the baby. And so to really have some clarity and common ground about what the couple wants for the inclusion of their family can be, I think, really healing, and it can set up expectations that can extend throughout, like, for long periods of time. You can always change those expectations given the needs you have, but to be able to vocalize them up front helps a lot.
And so you're saying, like, talk about this before as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, some people are like, we want our parents at the hospital, and some people are like, I don't want to see anybody for a month.
Mm.
And I think really just honoring whatever the parents really need and knowing that they have the right to change their mind at any time. But I think without that, people, as we all get with our families, like, we want to please our families. We want, my mom is going to really want to see her grandchild, rather than like, this is my child and I'm going to invite my mom when I'm ready to have her be a part of the baby's life.
That was actually a pet peeve of mine. My mom kept saying, give me my baby.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Julia, we had a question that I missed.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any differences in complaints from heterosexual versus homosexual couples in that early postpartum time? Or do you feel like it's kind of partner, birthing person, like that's really the dynamic?
Well, that's why I use those terms very specifically. Like, I think there is kind of like a stereotype with men specifically, with like heterosexual couples, where there's like this kind of jealousy that comes up with men about the mom's relationship with the baby. I haven't seen that as much with queer couples or homosexual couples. And obviously with two dads, it's a whole different experience, but we're talking about birthing partners. I think though, like with any dynamic, it's like you go from having a really close relationship with your partner, and then there's this other creature that comes into the picture, and the love that you experience for your child is very, very different than the love you feel for your partner. Mm-hmm. And it wins. That's probably controversial for me to say, but like, you just, your child, you feel this like innate protection and sense of loyalty in a way that is just very different than you feel for your partner. And you love them, but like, when it comes to it, you're gonna attune to your baby attune to the needs of your partner.
Yeah, it's like a biological thing that you don't really even have control over. Like, your brain is rewired to bond you to your baby, because your baby is so gosh darn dependent on you, you know?
Yeah. And it's scary. It's scary to have that much responsibility and to love someone so much who's now living outside your body. Like, when they're in your body, I think there's a sense of control, like, okay, they're here, they're in their little comfortable space, their incubator, and now they're here and I'm supposed to take care of them. And the thought of anything happening to them feels like it could destroy you. I mean, I think that's why there is a higher likelihood, other than the hormonal shifts that women go through, for anxiety and depression and things like this following having a baby, is your vulnerability and responsibility. It grows.
I really want to talk. I didn't think I was going to want to talk about this, but I would love to talk about intrusive thoughts, because I think that is probably one of the most common things that I hear from people. And for me, it was probably the scariest part of being pregnant the first time. Once I got around to the third baby and I had the same intrusive thoughts, I was like, okay,
yeah.
thoughts,
It's not real.
But the first time I was really scared, and I would love to just sort of normalize that experience and talk about what it is, and from your perspective,
Yeah. So I think most people who give birth or are pregnant, are going through infertility. I mean, you're going to have intrusive thoughts there too. But because of that vulnerability, I think we're in high alert sometimes. So the one that I'll use myself as an example. When I see a swimming pool and my kid is walking by the swimming pool, I have an intrusive thought immediately of they're going to fall in and drown, right? That's not a comfortable thought to have. No one likes having that thought, but that's the one that pops into my head. And so really just reminding myself of, like, I don't have to judge myself for thinking dark thoughts. I mean, and sometimes there can be thoughts that you have about harming your baby. Now that when those come up and you're having those more intensely, like a lot of times that has to do with potentially postpartum OCD, which is something that you want to keep an eye on. And I think a lot of women think like they're going crazy when those kinds of thoughts come up. And then, there can be thoughts of like doing something that clearly they do not want to do to their child, but they're having those thoughts specifically because they are so scared of that happening. And so I think that's where like postpartum psychosis and postpartum OCD, some practitioners get really confused with the difference. Postpartum OCD, those people are very, very low likelihood of harming their baby. And I think with just regular anxiety, there are going to be those things that come up too, just because you're on the lookout, you're scanning, you're like, there's a safety hazard. Another one is like choking. And that was another one that came up for me. Like my older daughter had like little Legos all over the house. And when my son was like crawling around, I'd be like, God, don't put anything in your mouth. Like yeah.
I found one of the very tiniest Legos in my daughter's poop.
I believe it. At least, yeah.
I was like, my God. Okay, so we've got one intrusive thought. When she's walking around the house and she goes around a corner, she always thinks that she's going to accidentally knock her head on something. So she's really cautious. Oh my God, I can't tell you the number of times that I've banged my child's head into a door frame.
Yep. Yeah. And I think just knowing that experience is part of taking on this added level of responsibility for this human being that you feel is so defenseless.
Yeah.
And that's not a symbol of like, you're not going crazy. You're not like, you're responding, your body is responding in this hypervigilant way. I think if you find it's like becoming so intrusive that it's interfering with you being able to take care of yourself or take care of your baby or, work, if you want to go back to work or, anything leading to disconnect between you and your baby, like that's where I encourage people to go talk about things like with either their doctor, primary care, or seeking a therapist or psychiatrist just to get, because we don't want to interfere with anything having to do with your bonding to your.
I think it's sort of like if I think about it in my own house, I have a staircase, and if a child were to jump over the balcony, they would fall, right? And so I walk by the balcony holding a baby all the time, and I always imagine that she's going to like jump out of my arms.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But the difference is that I still always will walk
Yes.
back and forth in my house. If
Yeah.
I couldn't do that anymore, like if I wouldn't walk past that
Mhm.
place anymore, then that would be a really good reason to go find someone to talk to. Is that right?
Yeah. Like if I couldn't take my kids to the pool because I was so distressed, if I was like, no, they're never going, and you know, they're older now, they're 5 and 8, but like, you know, yeah, you got to make sure it's not interfering with your life and the quality of life that you want to have.
I felt like actually one of the biggest fights that I ever got in with my partner was about essentially that. He was like, you need to go to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
That's like intrusive thought stuff. And he didn't approach it in the best way, but he wasn't wrong. So
Yeah.
I,
Well, and that circles back to what we were talking about before of like sometimes when it's not brought up, that's when it comes up in an unhelpful way when people are out of frustration. And I'm guessing for you, like it would have been kind of painful to hear about that anyway. It's hard to have that reflected by your partner, but if he had come to you with like, or they had come to you with gentleness and been like, you know, Emily, I've noticed.
yeah,
Yeah, you seem like you're really distressed by this, and I want you to have support. And I think it'd be great for the whole family. That probably would have felt gentler.
and if it happened in a moment where the intrusive thoughts affected us, you know, it
Yes.
happened,
Like you need to deal with this.
affected me, which affected him, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's zoom out from the intrusive thought conversation and talk a little bit more about boundaries with family. What are some ways to, I know that we talked about like we as a couple need to discuss like what are we willing to accept in terms of help? What are we willing to allow in terms of visitation and visitors when we're postpartum? What happens when like you've had that conversation and then this person's parents are like, we're coming over, and there's
Yeah. That happens.
maybe that boundary is just not respected, or, you know, what are some ways to navigate that?
I think that's really challenging because, you know, most of us don't like to push back, especially on our parents. It depends how much practice we have. So some of us have a lot of practice, some of us do not. And sometimes those needs really change. So, like, what might be a really great dynamic pre having a baby might actually not work. Like the idea of like dropping by unannounced. I think that's a really great one where that might have worked before and you might have gotten into a pattern, but really just being able to kind of challenge yourself to be open with your family about what it is that you want. A lot of people respond better when you state it from a positive rather than reject. So, like, I think we have a tendency to be like, no, no, but not actually go through the rhythm of being like, I would like you to visit on Sunday and have dinner with us and hang out with the babies so like I can take a shower. And would you also mind walking the dog while you're here? But like really being affirmative about what it is that you're looking for from the family support. What I've been really surprised by is that people respond really well when you give them purpose. If they don't understand what it is that you're expecting, I think they're probably trying to make like, oh, I need to show up for my child, like they need me, when in reality they might not be being helpful. So people, this is not everybody. Okay, there's going to be a lot of exceptions. There's some people who are going to push the boundaries regardless and are not going to listen and are not going to be attuned. But like the majority of people really like to be helpful. And so really letting them know, like I've even had something that I've had people do is like in the early stages, like make a list of things that would be helpful and put it on your refrigerator, like on a whiteboard or something. And then when people come over, be like, you know, when people come over, I've been asking if you have it in you, would you mind doing one of the things that I have listed up here? It could be like start a laundry load, hold the baby while I take a shower, take the dog for a walk. I don't know, make me a sandwich. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And that can be really helpful.
Great. I love that for parents, especially because I know my in-laws are super helpful, but they also don't want to be intrusive and they want to like show up when they're asked, but they don't want to kind of like step on anybody's toes. And for me, it was overwhelming to like navigate the eggshell thing. Like, don't walk on eggshells, just like come over. It's fine. But when you're walking on eggshells, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
So I think there's something to be said for like that list, like go do the thing. We don't have
Talk
to,
about it.
yeah.
I don't want to have to, I don't want to have to tell anybody anything when I'm
Yeah.
in that state.
Same kind of goes for friendships too. I know
Yes,
friendships
that's,
can be like incredibly impacted by having a baby, especially if you're like the one or the first one in your friend group to have a baby.
yeah.
How, in your practice, what have you seen people talk about most when it comes to navigating changes in their friendships after having a baby?
So I've seen a wide variety. I think one thing that I've noticed, if there's a big cohort of people having babies at the same time, and then there's maybe one friend who's not, that can be really alienating and isolating for that one friend. And then those friendships can kind of drop off if there becomes this kind of like, oh, we're all in this cohort and you're not. For someone who's having a baby first, I think there's probably also just some kind of awareness that like people aren't going to really get it fully, and really trying to find community with some people who do have kids. So whether that doesn't have to be big, that could be, going to the library for, parent and me story time, or it could be taking swim lessons with your baby, or I don't know, meeting neighbors who have young kids, but still finding ways to stay connected. I actually was the first one in my friend group to have a baby, and I remember my daughter just like crawling around on the floor. We hosted Thanksgiving, and like just really having to accommodate, like, okay, people need to come to us because we have a baby that we need to put down for bedtime. And so, I would have friends who would come over, they go to bed at like 7:30 at a certain point. Like, they'd come over for dinner after, and then we'd have quality adult time. It didn't work as well if I expected them to come over and just hang out with me and my baby without a balance of like having time without my daughter present.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's easier with one kid too.
Well, I'm saying daughter because she was the first one. I have, it
Yep.
hasn't been that way since.
And I remember, we used to have these, I mean, we still do this, but we have pizza parties all the time and then just
Yeah.
invite everyone. And when we first started having them, our daughter was the only baby. And now
Mhm.
it is chaos. It is
Yeah.
like kid chaos. And nobody can go to sleep at 7:30. Like even our baby who probably should be going to sleep at 7:30, like no way. But the party also has shifted. It used to be that people would show up at 6 and stay until 10:30, and we'd have like stragglers and we'd be like, we're going to bed. And now everyone is out by 7:30 or 8. Like
It's like 4 to, yeah.
show up early and they leave for bedtime, and the stragglers stay until 8:30.
Yeah.
So, but things just kind of shift naturally. And I think I actually have three of my very best friends didn't have kids. I'm really grateful for those friendships and for all of our efforts to maintain those friendships, because
Yeah.
I think as a mom, having someone who doesn't need to talk about baby stuff all the time, or like what your kid is doing or what your sleep is doing, it's sort of refreshing.
It reminds you of your life before too.
And allows you to zoom out a little bit, which is very helpful. And I think also I've had really good conversations with one of my friends about how, as a person who's chosen not to have kids, she actually feels left out of a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, um, and I mean, as somebody whose like goal in life is to support people in postpartum and pregnancy and, make spaces accessible and available for children, having someone be like, I don't want a child around because I want a space that's for adults is hard.
Yeah.
But also, we have to understand and accommodate everyone. And I think it's really important to be flexible. And I think matrescence forces flexibility on us a little bit. Like our brains
Mhm.
are adapting and trying to be more flexible.
Said in those early years of when you have like a very young child, I think there is just naturally like kind of like, I don't want to call it an obsession because that sounds unhealthy, but there's a very big focus, and there has to be, just because you're really doing this hard thing. And I think sometimes, when your child starts to get older, or your children start to get older, there is a little bit more ability to zoom out. And sometimes just like educating friends who don't have kids about like, look, I know I'm being a little bit more selfish than usual right now. this is just kind of the phase of life that I'm at. Can you hang in there with me? Please let me know if you're getting frustrated. Let's make sure we're talking about it. You're really important to me. Can really go a long way of just making sure that your friend feels supported and cared for too.
Absolutely. And I do feel like for me, being told, no, you can't bring your baby to a place where like I'm breastfeeding this baby. I'm like,
Yeah.
not going to go on a bachelorette trip for 3 days where I'm going to have to pump every 2 hours and not bring my, that's like, and of course, postpartum, somebody who suggested that I do that is like, I'm sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. But before having a baby, she's like, why not? Just come, you know? It'll be more fun without your baby. And I'm like, no, it will be not fun because I will have to be pumping and
be engorged and yeah. I think too, sometimes when we're in that state, it feels so obvious to us. And I think we can forget that like our friends may not be trying to be insensitive. They may just not get it. And so really, you know, making that an opportunity to be like, well, I don't need to explain the whole thing. I can just decide, okay, maybe I'll go to the dinner part of the bachelorette party if it's in town, and then I'll go home and feed my baby, and I won't stay overnight, but like I'm going to show up for the pieces that I can. And if obviously if something comes up or it's coming up all the time, it can be an opportunity to share that with your friend. But also like there's things we can let go and be like, they don't get it, but they still love me. And, you know, and then if they go on to have children, I've had people apologize later, be like, I'm so sorry. Like I had a friend who invited me to her wedding. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. It was like in Lake Tahoe, and I was 6 weeks postpartum, and we would have had to drive like 8 hours. And I was just like, I'm not doing it. I think she felt really, really hurt. And then she had babies a few years later, and she's like, yeah, there's no way I would have gone to the wedding. That was such a great call on your part. But I think just the perspective is so different.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not in it.
Great advice to just acknowledge like, hey, I'm in this season right now. Just hang here with me. Like, I think it's easy for someone who's not in that season to be like, wow, she's gone. She's just in phase now, you know? And to be able to say like, hey, I'm here. I know that I feel like I'm just distant because I'm so focused on this baby, but like, this is just where I'm at, and like, hang in there with me.
So I will emerge. Well, Donna, I love what you said, as long as it's truly a season. I think it's a change. It's a permanent change. At least it has been for me and for a lot of the people. And I don't regret the permanence of that change. I think it's really, I love being a parent, and yet now I have the space in my brain that's constantly occupied by both of my children. I have like little pockets for each of them. They're not as loud as they were when my kids were smaller. Like I can send them off to school and I'm not thinking about, are they okay? Did they eat? When did they poop? Are they like just the things that you think about when you have a really small baby, some of those worries really do dissipate.
Yeah, that's totally true. The when did they poop is so real.
I know. I used to track like how many times did they poop? And the doctor told me I need to check their pee and their poop and how many times they eat. And it's amazing how long that time feels, but it's actually not that long a period of time where you're in that space.
Jenny said that friends keep inviting her to music festivals, and she's like, I have a 4-month-old baby.
No, absolutely not.
Ask me next year. And yeah, that's great. But also next year, you're going to have a toddler running around. If your baby ever needs a pacifier, and not all babies do, the one that I would want in your world is the Ninny. It's the only pacifier designed to actually mimic the shape and function of the breast. It looks like this. It's very soft here, like an areola, and then harder, like a nipple. And this shape means that it supports healthy oral development instead of interfering with it. I really love it because babies don't just passively hold it in their mouth like the ones with the bulb on the end. They have to actively suck. It's hard work. It's my workout pacifier. And that matters for feeding, for regulation, and for long-term oral function. It's especially beautiful for breastfed babies who need a little extra soothing without confusion. If you're listening and you're pregnant, postpartum, or buying for someone you love, you can grab a Ninny through the link in the show notes or use the code BeWellBaby for 10% off at checkout. It's one of these tiny little tools that makes a huge difference. And my favorite part about it is that babies don't get dependent on it. All right, let's get back to the show. I just went camping with all three of my kids.
Yep.
21 months, 4 years, and almost 7. And the 21-month-old is the one that was the most challenging because she just wants to be everywhere. She sees people and she's like, run! And she runs towards them.
Yeah.
So sweet, but it's also just a lot of work.
It has to be when you're ready to do that, though. I think that sometimes I've had people at various times tell clients of mine or tell me, like, well, why can't you just leave the baby? And they say it in not a very nice way. And sometimes you're not ready to leave the baby. It's not just that the baby's not ready to have you leave, but you really got to respect your own timeline and whatever that looks like, because it's going to be very different. Like, there are going to be people who are taking their babies to music festivals, and then there are people who are like, I would never take my baby anywhere loud, or I could never be away from my baby for more than 2 hours. And there's some people like, I'm going on a bachelorette vacation. My in-laws will take care of the baby for 3 days. And so it's
Mom said that her parents went off the grid backpacking for 2 weeks when her sister was 3 weeks old.
Yeah. See, there's a huge range.
Huge range. Yeah. Actually, when my first baby was 2 weeks old, we had been sort of stuck in the house and we were like, well, we can go anywhere. Like, all I have to do is breastfeed the baby. So we got in the car and just started driving and ended up like in the mountains, and we ended up staying in a motel, which was not awesome, but like we just like needed to be out and about. So I get that. Mm-hmm. Although the backpacking postpartum 3 weeks is a lot.
Wow, kudos to your mom. That's a strong lady.
Okay, one other question that we kind of skipped over was, what advice do you have about navigating like really big cultural differences in parenting for someone whose partner is like, her parents have a very different culture?
I mean, I think that one is so multi-layered because there's so many layers of, there's family culture, there's also like, there's guilt sometimes if you're feeling like you're excluding your family's, say your parents were born in another country and you were born here, navigating like your own expectations of what you want postpartum to look like or pregnancy to look like, and the cultural traditions that you want to honor in your parents, or maybe that you don't really want to honor, and how that interferes with your partner's own set of expectations. And so, I mean, I think really it's finding the through line of what really works for you. And I think sometimes that can take a lot of honing because there's a lot of guilt that comes up, I think, when you're trying to navigate pleasing everybody. And sometimes that means allowing people to be disappointed or to be invited in. But allowing people to be disappointed, I think, is one of the hardest relational things that most of us struggle with. Like, oh, great, I'm going to have to like let down somebody and they're going to be upset at me for my choices.
I do think if it's your partner's parents that we're talking about, that it's your partner's responsibility to
communicate that
with you, decide as a couple what's important to us here and what are we willing to let them do, For me, it was like, am I going to let them change the diaper in the way that I don't want them to change the diaper?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that going to be like a hard line for me? And I was like, okay, my baby's hips will probably be fine if my mom changes the diaper in this way 3 times. I'm going to be okay with that. I'm going to let that one go, but I'm not going to, have my mom carry the baby down the stairs because I'm too scared.
Or it might be even like religious differences as well. Like, oh, are they going to be baptized, or they have these specific cultural or religious traditions that like you may not agree with. I think people, oh gosh, corporal punishment. Oh yeah, hard line on that one. Like how, I think especially as you approach toddler years, how, maybe we were parented versus how we choose to parent our kids, there becomes a lot of conversations about pretty, being able to be pretty firm about the rules that you have and your comfort around that.
I think also something that has helped me is just talking about how much we know now. Like there's so much new information. It's not that like you as a parent did something wrong. You did the best you could with the information you have. Now that I'm a parent, there's more information. And that's why I'm choosing to do it this way.
Yeah, I remember when my mom came to help me postpartum, and she was like, I really appreciated how she said it, because she was like, I want to ask you all these questions, Julia, because we did it so differently. So I want to understand, because when I was a baby, they were laying us on our stomachs to sleep. And she's like, oh my gosh, and you're not allowed to have blankets in the crib. And she was being curious about it, which I so appreciated, instead of being like, this is the way you have to do it. Or like, if your baby's crying, you have to you have to use a pacifier, or you have to, I don't know, you should be feeding them more. Whatever. People have their own, but just being curious about those differences and educating can be really a nice bridge.
Totally. And I think it gets harder as your kids get older and have behaviors that your in-laws or your parents disapprove of.
Oh, yeah.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
I think I'd love to kind of wrap up with, is there a story from your practice that illustrates both that like struggle and the transformation into like something a little bit more balanced in postpartum relationships? It could be any relationship, but anything that kind of comes.
Yeah. So there's the one that comes to mind is the couple that I touched on before that I worked with all through pregnancy and then into postpartum. And they had a lot of conflict about like kind of power struggles that would happen. And that was one of the reasons they were there, is to really, they had a lot of conflict with in-laws and family members. And they worked really hard to be on the same page and to practice kind of what you were talking about, of like, you're responsible for communicating with your family and about us and our needs collectively. And what I noticed is that because they had some of that planning, they both like got really back into self-care really quickly after having a baby. They made the transition back to work when both of them went back to work. There was a lot of room for receiving complaints. Mm-hmm. And fairly good naturedly, and also really knowing those potential things that could come up, because they'd come up in other ways before. And so I think their identity shifting, I think there was less grief because it felt like less of a shock. I think the grief piece is very real, because there's a grief of like, yeah, like your friendships, your family relationships, your identity, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your partner. This is life now. Oh my God, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And so I saw it was very graceful, and I was really excited about that, because I haven't gotten the opportunity to work in that like whole period of time in that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a testament to planning, and talking and communicating before this huge change happens.
And we don't think to do it always. We don't know necessarily how to plan sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I could ask you a million more questions, but why don't you tell us a little bit about where people can find you and learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, juliachapmanpsychotherapy.com. And I do primarily telehealth in Oregon and California. And actually, I'm going to be starting working in a nurse practitioner's office. She does integrative medicine over near Multnomah Village. I'm going to be working there 1 day a week. So I will be seeing people in person.
What office is that?
It's called the Flourish Center. So I'm really excited to be able to be in person again if people want to come in.
Julia, it was so nice talking to you and connecting with you.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining me on that journey with Julia. It's really clear to me that relationship shifts are expected, and early parenthood is a season of immense change. But with intentional communication with our partners, with our friends, with our families, with really good self-care, with clear boundaries, couples can navigate those relationship shifts gracefully and maintain connection with each other, with their families, in their friendships. And let's be honest, maintaining friendships in adulthood is no joke. It is hard to do. Making new friends in adulthood is hard to do. And having a baby is one of those rare opportunities where you do end up making new adult friends because of the new season that you're in. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit subscribe, leave us a review. Every single share helps another person in your life understand what they're going through and feel like they're not alone. I'll see you next week on the Be Well Baby podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Instagram at BeWellBabyPDX or just visit BeWellBaby.org. Send an episode to someone who's pregnant, postpartum, or just needs guidance. No one should have to do this alone. Welcome to the Be Well Baby podcast. You're in the right place.